Well, welcome back, everybody, to Two Pastors and a Mic. My name is Shannon.
And I'm Corey.
And we're so thankful that you're joining us today, wherever you're listening from.
Wherever.
We're grateful for you. Also, those of you joining us on YouTube and GAN, thank you for joining us as well.
Yo.
We actually got some exciting news to start off with. Speaking of sharing this podcast and subscribing and liking, we do that every week, but it's been working. The word's been getting out more and more on this podcast.
Yes.
And I would say by this time next week, we will have hit 60,000 downloads. So thank you so much for listening and tuning in and sending your questions.
And sharing.
I love that. Matter of fact, you actually just this past week got to spend some time with a home church that has been going through some of our podcasts.
Shout out to you
questions.
all if you're listening. Big shout out to Joshua.
Yeah, and I just thought that was super cool.
So cool.
And we've had a lot of people reach out to just let us know that this is helping them in their journey. It's expanding their views and their thinking, and really that's why we do this. Yeah. And so just thank you so much for that.
For sure. Why don't you give them a big update on the Re-Initiative? If you've been paying attention to Hill City Church, we've been sharing some stuff on this podcast. We have some big announcements.
Right. I closed out the series Flow at our church this past week, and I really just talked about the experiential knowledge that we get following after Jesus is really incredible. And I just wanted to share experiences with our church, some experiences that I've had personally over the last few months in this Re-Initiative. And I did that for a reason, because it kind of culminated. You know, if you've been following us in this journey on the Re-Initiative, we have 2 homes, 2 single moms and their families have moved into these homes so far. And we actually had a third one we knew we had a signed contract on, and we will be closing on that next week, Monday, May 6th. And we thought that was going to be the third one added to our Re-Initiative. Well, just in the last few weeks, some crazy things have happened. A property on Silver Street, which is where we have our first home, we've had our eye on it for about 6 months. The whole time we've been working, it was this church with a parsonage on the lot next door. A small, older, kind of white church, white country church, like the white is in the color of the
clarifying.
Building. As soon as I said that, I'm like, I better put a disclaimer out there on that. And so, the price on it was a little bit too high out of our price range. They kept dropping it. Me and you actually went and looked at this property in January, like, man, what could we do? Of course, the house could go with the initiative, and it was commercial property, so we could really do anything with this church building. And then really the story I had to tell, and I'll tell it very briefly here, is I had a buddy that was tracking it, because I had kind of not forgot about it, but I wasn't like checking in every day or every week on the price if they dropped it, because we actually tried to submit a kind of a lowball offer, but they didn't even want to hear it. And we ended up, a friend texted me out of the blue and said, hey, I got a property for you. All you got to do is say yes. And I'm like, bet. Yeah, I got it. I want it.
Whoa. How old are you?
I promise you I texted bet.
How old are you?
I'm 44 years old.
You're past that.
And I really never say that.
Know,
but I put that in the text.
That's the first time I've ever heard
I don't know why.
Bet?
I was excited. I put it in the text. And so he's like, all right, it's that church and that house that I sent you the link to a long time ago that you already went and looked at. I'm like, well, yes, I want that. He goes, well, I put in a lowball offer at $120,000 for both properties together. And they really wouldn't take that, but I got them negotiated down to 130, and I was really just doing that for you. So it's already set up. The deal's done at 130. You just call the realtor, tell them that it's you that wants it, and it's a done deal. So officially, I closed on that last week. And so instead of properties, what we thought would be 4 and 5, we actually jumped the gun ahead of number 3. So we just added properties number 3 and 4 with the church and the house next to it.
Crazy.
So that's 3 and 4, and then we'll add number 5 next Monday, like we had planned. And so this is really blowing up beyond our wildest imagination.
And we got that property. You said the number, but you didn't say the previous number.
Yeah, well, it started at 220, and then it kept dropping, and we offered 140
when it was listed at 180.
The lowball offer, right? And they wouldn't accept it or even.
And then we got it for 10,000
and then
less.
We got it for
2 months
130.
later. It's so crazy when you just.
But the connections and partnerships. Even my friend doing that. I mean, he could have tried to get that for himself, or buy it and sell it and try to make some money on it.
So I've had people reach out to me, not just a part of our church wanting to get involved, but people that are not a part of our church or not relatively close, and they want to give financially to this. Can you tell them how they can jump in?
So I want to give a shout out, first of all, for the few families that are listening out of state that have already sent stuff when we put out those Amazon wish lists.
Crazy.
And so if you're following us on socials, Hill City, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, you'll see us from time to time whenever we go to move these women into the homes. They need things. And so we put out an Amazon wish list. Both times we've done this, we've gotten every single item from you all, from our listeners, from people here at church that send things. So thank you so much. But also, if you want to give specifically and directly to this initiative, if you just go to hillcity.tv, you can click the give button. But what defaults on the giving page is just general on the drop-down box. You just click that drop-down box, and the House Initiative is at the very bottom of that.
It's called the Re-Initiative, right?
Or House Initiative, I think. And you just click House Initiative, and all of those funds go directly to the 100%. Purchase or renovation
100% goes to it.
Of the homes. And so we're excited about
it's
it.
Called
and I just
Housing
wanted
Initiative.
Housing
I
Initiative.
Just looked it up.
And so, we just wanted to take just a couple minutes to kind of give you an update, to thank all of the ones that have given. But we got so much more to do, and it's amazing. And it's not just me. Community is behind this, and that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, it was really cool because in our end of the year meeting in 2023, we talked about your goal for the entire year was to be managing 3 properties.
We had 1, and I'm like, 2 more would be cool.
3, and now it's April. Well, technically May, and we have 5, which is crazy. And God knows what's going to happen with this. And so we just appreciate you listening to this. If you that's new to you and you want to find out more, we have a website that is being worked on to communicate not just what we're doing, but the stories, because you have so many stories of just like these God moments of things just happening. And you're like, how? Yeah,
it goes well beyond coincidence. Some of the things that I get to experience every day when you're just out in the community with people, and like just how God connects the dots and brings everything full circle to, the world is honestly, it's big at times, but it's also so much smaller than what we think, even in our own like community and how everything's connected. It's pretty cool to be a part of. It is really cool.
Well, today we've got kind of a special thing happening. Every now and then on this podcast, we do some book studies or book recommendations. Last year, we did William Paul Young's book, Lies We Believe About God, and it was leading up to Jamie's conference, which Jamie has a conference here hosted at our church. It's all him, by the way, and he brings in these speakers. And last year, he had Paul Young, and so we decided to go through that book with the hope and desire that Paul Young would actually be on this podcast. And if you go back and listen to those messages, you can hear us. And then we had Paul Young on the podcast. It's one of our most downloaded
I was going to say, I think it's episodes. The
second, yeah.
Overall, outside of our like introduction or our very first podcast.
It's the most listened to.
William Paul Young's is the most listened to.
His sermon at Hill City is the most downloaded sermon in the history of Hill City YouTube page. So shout out to Paul Young. And so this year, Jamie's having the conference here again at our church at Hill City, and he's bringing in C. Baxter Kruger, which if you've never heard this name, he is one of the most well-respected theologians. I really look up to him from an academia perspective. He's got a book that we're actually going to be going through for the next 4 weeks called Jesus and the Undoing of Adam. It is only 70 pages, very simple read. Well, not simple, very complex read, but very simple in terms of length.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through this because there's 4 chapters, 4 weeks. And our hope again this year is hopefully in 4 weeks from now, you'll be hearing from C. Baxter Kruger on this podcast.
We'll see. That'd
no
be
guarantees.
Super cool if that happens.
But yeah, this book is so life-changing, especially in the New Covenant lens and understanding who Jesus actually is. I think we're going to just unpack some of this stuff. And so we're just going to read some of our favorite quotes. We might dialogue about it. It might just kind of be just highlights, and we're going to go through these 4 chapters over the next 4 weeks. And so week 1, Jesus and the Undoing of Adam. In his introduction, he says a couple things that I thought were really worth highlighting. Well, first one...
I was going to say, it's going to set the tone for the book as well.
Yeah, he says, perception is not everything, but it certainly dominates our experience of every person we meet and every event or situation we place we encounter, which is, again, your perception is not necessarily what's true, but it's true to you. So we have to think about that. And then he goes on and talk about the disciples of Jesus learned by bitter experience that human beings have a way of imposing their own ideas upon God. And they learned that in doing so, that we not only create a God of our own imaginations, we also miss the real God and thus the joy of his presence and activity and blessing. And I kind of say it like this, I'm writing some ebooks because I have this desire to release some ebooks in 2025. And on one of the ebooks, it's like how to read the Bible in like a simple formation. Obviously, you can't put everything you know about how to read the Bible in a short ebook. But my opening phrase for this book is people really don't want truth. What they want is reassurance that what they already believe is true. And that's why when you hear something different, people don't necessarily, they're very quick to either rebuttal it or say, no, I can't.
Yeah, they get very combative very quickly.
Because again, we talked about ego several weeks ago in our Devil series. Is like when people disagree with what you believe, they take it. All of people tend to take it personally.
Right. So with that statement you open your book with, or this ebook you're creating, I love that thought. But is that kind of the thinking of confirmation bias?
Yeah, definitely.
And that we talked about that on the podcast at one point. But I think that's true. Like when you get to have these conversations with people from all walks of life, and based on experience, that can shape their perspective.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what he's talking about to open up the book. Like perspective is everything. And based on experiences, then we perceive God to be a certain way because we would handle it a certain way.
Right.
Or things have been handled in our experience a certain way, maybe even by other people. And so we just automatically put those perceptions as assumptions on God and how he operates.
Yeah, for sure. We oftentimes, I've been very guilty of this, and that's why over the last 12 years, a lot of what I believed has changed, because I realized that I was throwing my own denominational projections and my own understanding of God from that time point in my life, and I created a God in my image, because you can find different versions of God, and that's why we will always go back to Jesus is the full representation of God. He is perfect theology. He is how you should read the Bible. He's the lens through which you understand and interpret the scriptures with. And that, unfortunately, is a controversial phrase, but it shouldn't be. So.
Right. And speaking of that lens and looking at things through the lens of Jesus, it's actually what I highlighted in the introduction, the kind of the only thing I did, or one of the few things I did. And he says, the fact is that we all have mental glasses that we wear, right? Back to the perception. And inevitably, how we use them is not where the problem lies. The difficulty is in the fact that we have the wrong prescription. And so again, based on own experiences possibly, or traumas, or whatever the case may be, we start wearing these prescriptions that cause us to view things with a wrong lens.
It's a distorted view, because we're not viewing scripture through 2020, which would be Jesus.
Right.
I love that. And so are we jumping to chapter 1?
Yeah.
Chapter 1 is titled Why Jesus Died. And if you've been following our podcast for a long time, we actually did 2 podcast episodes on this. Episode 134, 7 Reasons Why Jesus Was Not Sacrificed for Your Sins, which was a very dicey podcast, but give it a chance, listen to it. And then the very next session or episode 135 was 7 Reasons Why Jesus Had to Die, which again was a piggyback from episode 134. But he unpacks this in what I think is just an incredible way. I got several things to quote, but I think you're going to
So
go
this
first.
is one of the first things that this is one of the few things we both highlighted as we were reading through this on our own. But again, this chapter is titled Why Jesus Died. And this I thought was so good. He said, the Christian God is interested in relationship with us, and not just relationship, but union, and not just union, but such a union that everything he is and has, all glory and fullness, all joy and beauty and unbridled life, is to be shared with us and to become as much ours as it is his. And that's just so beautiful when you think about this union. And we actually didn't, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about just being intertwined, and we had no idea that this is what the first thing we'd be talking about. But that idea of being intertwined, and I know in the podcast a few weeks ago, we talked about how that's one of the first steps to unlocking or destroying the dams in our life so that we can flow and experience this beautiful, full, abundant life that is found in Jesus. And the first step is that we recognize that we're not separated, that we're in perfect union with him. And I love that he says, like, everything that he is and that he has, this joy and abundance and life, like he wants to share that with us.
Yeah.
And that should be so encouraging to you.
Yeah. And it's something that's always present and always has been present in your life, whether you believe it or not. But the importance of belief is that it reveals this union so that it can be activated. I love that he uses those verbiages of like, glory, fullness, joy, beauty, union, because our life is now full of the divine life.
Yeah.
Like that's a permanent reality.
Yeah. And he said unbridled, which goes right in line with what we were talking about. Unbridled, you think of this free-flowing life, free-flowing, not bridled up, locked up,
Reservoired.
contained.
Yeah. Our life should ultimately look like a dance with the divine, and then that dance should overflow to others. And have you ever gone to like a dance party, and it just takes a couple people to get out on that dance floor, and then you have a party, right? It takes a couple to get it started. That should be like the Christian life. Like your life should be a dance that people see you dancing, and some people might make fun of you, but eventually people are going to join in because they see the beauty of it, even if you can't dance. And he says, he piggybacks that thought. One of the things I thought was great. He said, before creation, the triune God decided that the human race would be included in the Trinitarian circle of life and fullness and glory and joy. That's kind of like the whole theme of this first chapter, is recognizing the fullness of God in your life, which should produce glory and joy in this perfect union.
Right. And speaking of union, he doesn't talk about this, I don't think. This is just something I'm thinking of right now. This idea of union, like, so if we're called the bride of Christ, right? That's why Paul, he kind of uses this metaphor and this language to kind of talk about the mystery that we're one, right? Just like husband and wife are one. He kind of uses this illustration to say, we are one with the Father and the Son. Matter of fact, that was Jesus's prayer, right? John 17. Father, me and you are one. I pray that they would understand that we're all one together and coming together with union. That's just so good. I know for me, speaking of this unbridled life, he actually goes on to say this. I think it's a good way to express it. He says, to be alive, to breathe, to exist is one thing. It's quite another to be filled with overflowing and abundant life. Adam and Eve, if you think about it, were both alive and filled, and both their existence and their abundant life came from God. What I mean here by abounding life is the filling of human existence that happens when we are free to love and be loved, free to know and be known, free to give ourselves to receive and to receive. And when we actually move from that freedom into action and into fellowship, in that fellowship, something happens to us. Something is quickened into being that is more than we are in ourselves. Abounding life is the fullness that is fired in the mix of knowing and being known, of intimacy, of loving and being loved and fellowship. And so what he's kind of expressing here, whenever we understand, it's back to that union. And I know even the 3 points were a couple of weeks ago in this idea of flow, were sons and daughters who know their union, who know their identity, who know their power. It's in this knowing who he is and this union we have for him, we get an understanding that we're known, to know and to be known. And then when you know that, you're able to go out in fellowship and bring other people into this knowing with you. And that's the abounding life.
Well, the very next thing that I had highlighted was his whole idea on knowing the Father's delight, his pleasure. And I put all caps in that. Like, it's his pleasure to know you and that you be known. Filled them with the most powerful force on earth, assurance. This assurance generated freedom to go out of themselves and embrace one another, to give and to receive, to expose themselves to be known. And when I read that, I thought of your whole sermon years ago. I can't even remember what sermon series it was, but your whole end line was, what if we one another each other better? Or what if we one another better?
Yeah, that was Andy Stanley, but yeah.
Oh, yeah?
I took it right from him.
Well,
in his book, Irresistible, which is a fantastic book.
But yeah,
he just talked about what if we one another better.
Yeah, and he goes on to even talk about, the serpent convinced Adam and Eve that they were missing out on the assurance, the security, the peace, which are beautiful. Again, he uses these words that I should be something in your life. Regardless of your circumstances, there should be this peace that surpasses all understanding.
Because they forgot their oneness. They forgot that they were connected in union with him, because if the temptation was, wait, you'll be like God, the answer should have been, obviously, well, wait, we're one. We're in union.
We're in union.
We're like him.
Right.
We're created in his image and likeness, and everything he has is mine. We're one.
Mm-hmm. And he says the human race was now lost in the most terrible darkness, the darkness of its own mind. locked into a cycle of anxiety, projection, and misperception. Is if we defined evil as dysfunction? Is that not dysfunction? Understanding or living and locked in the cycle of anxiety, projection, and misperception. The greatest disaster is that it projects its brokenness onto God's face. And we talk a lot about brokenness and wholeness. Episode 29, again, one of our most listened to episodes. It's you are not broken. Brokenness is the illusion created by trauma, but you are whole. You've always been whole. And so awaken to this knowing that you delight in the Father and the Father delights in you.
Yeah, I love that. And so towards the end of the chapter, he actually answers the question, why did Jesus die? And I know that's something that you had highlighted. Mm-hmm. Do you want to actually just read that?
Yeah. He died because the triune God loves us with an everlasting and passionate love, because the triune God absolutely refuses to allow us to be destroyed. He died because the only way to get from the fall of Adam to the right hand of God, the Father Almighty, was through the recreation of the Adamic existence that required the incarnation of the triune life of God, 33 years of struggle and suffering, and the crucifixion and resurrection of Adamic flesh.
Right. So Jesus being the last Adam.
The last Adam.
And speaking of that, it's kind of what I put down here too. Right under that, what I highlighted was, he says the deepest joy of the New Testament lies precisely in the fact that it sees that in this one man, Jesus Christ, God was dealing not just with Adam or with a general Adamic existence, but with the whole human race. The New Testament does not leave us contemplating Jesus from a distance. It leaves us seeing ourselves crucified with Christ, raised up with him, and seated with him at the right hand of the Father. So Jesus becoming this last Adam for the entire human race is a beautiful thing, and that's why Jesus had to die.
Jesus and the undoing of Adam. If you haven't gotten the book or have never read it, I encourage you to get it. It's a simple read. Hopefully, we'll have C. Baxter Kruger in the flesh coming up in a couple of weeks. No promises there, but yeah, it's a good book. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, love it. And as you said, it's only a short read, 72 pages, something like that. I will say, though, I sat down hoping I would just get through it in a single setting.
No.
But it's one of those things that you have to think and contemplate on ever so many paragraphs and chapter at a time, for sure. But it's a good read, especially if you're wanting to be encouraged in the full finished work of Jesus and what it actually represented and did for all of humanity. It's incredible. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll have the opportunity to interview C. Baxter Kruger later this month, and we'll continue this journey next week as well as we go through chapter 2. But just to kind of close the episode, I do want to reiterate again, thank you so much for joining us, for being a part of this journey with us.
Yeah.
We actually still love being able to get together and to release these episodes, and we continue to do it because of your encouragement. The fact that you reach out, that you let us know how the podcast is encouraging you, that means a lot to me, especially, and I know it does to you as well, Corey. We're both, and we say this all the time, we're both words of affirmation guys. And sometimes when you put labor and work, because it isn't just an easy thing to come in and do this every single week, it's not. But when you get the affirmation and you get the people that are experiencing freedom in a whole new way, like, we'll put in whatever amount of work we have to if that's the continued result that we're seeing from this podcast. And so thank you for that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for getting us to 60,000 downloads this week. And also thank you for giving and contributing to the Reinitiative. It's something that's big on my heart, our heart here in this place. And yeah, so thank you so much for that. You can go to hillcity.tv, give button, drop down box, housing initiative to give to that. But I think that's it. You got anything else?
No, you're loved. There's nothing you can do about it.